What happens when a former royal meets America's most outspoken talk show host? And the conversation takes a turn nobody saw coming. Today, we're diving into the moment that had everyone talking. When Meghan Markle appeared on The View, and things went from cordial to catastrophic in mere minutes. Make sure to subscribe and drop a comment below, because this story will have you questioning everything you thought you knew about daytime television. The studio lights blazed as Meghan Markle walked onto The View set, her signature smile beaming. As she waved to the audience, the applause was thunderous, but there was an undercurrent of tension that seemed to crackle through the air. Whoopi Goldberg, veteran host and no stranger to controversy, leaned back in her chair, with that familiar look of someone who had seen it all before. "Welcome to The View, Meghan," Whoopi began, her voice carrying its usual authority. "We're thrilled to have you here today." "Thank you so much for having me, Whoopi. I've always admired your work," Meghan replied, settling into her chair with practiced grace. Joy Behar jumped in with her characteristic enthusiasm. "So Meghan, let's talk about your new ventures. You've got so much going on. The podcast, the Netflix projects. How are you balancing it all?" Meghan's eyes lit up as she launched into her prepared response. "Well, Joy, it's all about finding your authentic voice and using your platform to make a difference. Harry and I have been so fortunate to have these opportunities to tell stories that matter, to shine light on issues that need attention." Sarah N. nodded approvingly. "That's wonderful. And speaking of making a difference, you've been quite vocal about social justice issues. How important is it for you to use your celebrity status for causes you believe in?" "It's everything," Meghan said, her voice growing more passionate. "I think when you have a platform, you have a responsibility. I've always believed that. Even before I married into the royal family, I was advocating for women's rights, for equality." Whoopi's expression shifted slightly, and those who knew her well could see the wheels turning. "Now, Meghan, let's talk about that royal family experience. You've made some pretty serious allegations about racism within the institution. That's a heavy accusation to make." The temperature in the room seemed to drop a few degrees. Meghan's smile faltered for just a moment before she regained her composure. "Whoopi, I think it's important to distinguish between the institution and the individual family members. I've never said the entire family is racist." "But you did say there were concerns about your son's skin color," Whoopi pressed, her tone becoming more direct. "That's not something you just casually mention in an interview with Oprah, unless you're making a point about racism." "I shared my truth about conversations that happened," Meghan replied, her voice taking on a defensive edge. "I think it's important for people to understand the reality of what we experienced." Sunny Hostin chimed in, trying to steer the conversation. "Meghan, a lot of people have been inspired by your courage to speak out. What would you say to critics who think you should have handled things differently?" But Whoopi wasn't finished. "See, here's what I don't understand. Meghan, you knew what you were getting into when you married into the royal family. This isn't some new institution that just popped up yesterday. The British monarchy has been around for over 1,000 years. They have their ways, their traditions, their protocols." Meghan's jaw tightened visibly. "Whoopi, I think that's a very simplistic way to look at it. Just because something has been done a certain way for a long time doesn't make it right." "I'm not saying it's right or wrong," Whoopi shot back. "I'm saying it's what it is. And if you're going to marry into it, you need to understand what you're signing up for." The audience was dead silent now, sensing the shift in energy. Meghan leaned forward in her chair, her diplomatic facade beginning to crack. "So you're saying I should have just accepted racism because it's tradition?" "I'm saying you should have done your homework," Whoopi replied without missing a beat. "This isn't some fairy tale, Meghan. This is real life with real consequences." Alyssa Farah Griffin tried to interject. I think what Whoopi might be getting at is, no, let her finish, Meghan interrupted, her voice rising slightly. I want to hear exactly what Whoopi thinks I should have done differently. Whoopi's eyes narrowed. You want to know what I think? I think you went into this with certain expectations, and when reality didn't match your expectations, you decided to burn it all down instead of working within the system to create change. The studio was so quiet you could hear a pin drop. Meghan's carefully constructed composure was starting to unravel, and everyone could see it happening in real time. Meghan's hands gripped the arms of her chair as she stared directly at Whoopi. Burn it all down. Is that really what you think I did? Well, didn't you? Whoopi responded, her tone unwavering. You had one of the most watched interviews in television history where you aired your grievances with the royal family. If that's not burning bridges, I don't know what is. I told my truth, Meghan said, her voice becoming sharper. I shared what happened to me, what I experienced. Are you saying I should have stayed silent? I'm saying there are ways to handle family business that don't involve going on international television. Whoopi fired back. You could have worked things out privately. You could have given it more time. Joy tried to step in again. Maybe we should know. Joy, Meghan cut her off, her eyes never leaving Whoopi's face. I want to address this. Whoopi, you're talking about giving it more time. How much time should someone give to an institution that's hurting them? How long should I have stayed silent while my mental health was deteriorating? Whoopi leaned forward, matching Meghan's intensity. Mental health is serious, and I'm not minimizing that. But you're a grown woman who made adult decisions. You chose to marry into this family, knowing full well what it entailed. Did I, though? Meghan's voice was rising now, her carefully modulated tone giving way to raw emotion. Did I really know what it entailed? Because nobody told me I'd be scrutinized for everything from how I held my baby bump to what I ate for breakfast. That's what happens when you marry a prince, Whoopi said matter-of-factly. It comes with the territory. And racism comes with the territory too. Meghan shot back. Is that what you're telling me? The other hosts exchanged uncomfortable glances. Sarah tried to jump in. I think maybe we're talking past each other here. No, Sarah, I think we're talking directly to each other. Whoopi interrupted. Meghan, I've been in this business for decades. I've faced racism, I've dealt with discrimination. But I've also learned that sometimes you have to work within the system to change it, not run away from it. Meghan's eyes flashed with anger. Run away. You think I ran away, didn't you? You left the royal family, left the UK, came to America, and then went on Oprah to tell your side of the story. If that's not running away, what would you call it? I would call it protecting my family, Meghan said, her voice trembling with confusion. I would call it choosing my mental health over a system that was breaking me down piece by piece. But here's what I don't understand, Whoopi continued, relentless in her questioning. You talk about protecting your family, but what about Harry's family? What about the relationships that were damaged by that interview? What about his relationship with his father, with his brother? Meghan was visibly shaking now. Are you seriously suggesting that I should have prioritized their comfort over my well-being? I'm suggesting that actions have consequences, Whoopi replied coldly, and sometimes those consequences affect more people than just yourself. You know what, Whoopi? Meghan stood up abruptly, her chair scraping against the floor. I thought coming on this show would be different. I thought I'd be talking to people who understood what it's like to be a woman of color in spaces where you're not always welcome. Oh, don't you dare, Whoopi said, also rising from her chair. Don't you dare try to make this about race, when it's about accountability. Everything about my experience has been about race. Meghan exclaimed, her voice echoing through the Studio. From the moment I started dating Harry, every single thing I did was filtered through the lens of my race. And you think that gives you a free pass to say whatever you want about whoever you want? Whoopi challenged. The audience was completely silent, watching this unprecedented confrontation unfold. The other hosts looked like they wanted to disappear into their chairs. "I don't need a free pass to tell the truth," Meghan said, her voice deadly quiet now. "And I certainly don't need permission from you or anyone else to share my experiences. But you do need to take responsibility for the impact of your words," Whoopi shot back. "You can't just drop bombs on international television and then act surprised when there's fallout." "Fallout," Meghan laughed bitterly. "You want to talk about fallout? Let's talk about the fallout I experienced every single day. I was part of that family. Let's talk about the suicide ideation, the complete lack of support, the isolation. And I'm sorry you went through that," Whoopi said, her tone softening slightly. "But that doesn't excuse how you handled it afterward." "Excuse?" Meghan's voice was incredulous. "I don't need to excuse anything. I survived. I got out. I protected my children. And if that bothers you or anyone else, that's not my problem." Whoopi's expression hardened as she stared at Meghan across the table. "And there it is. That's not my problem. That attitude right there is exactly what I'm talking about." "What attitude?" Meghan demanded, her hands trembling with rage. "The attitude of a woman who refused to be silenced. The attitude of someone who chose herself over an institution that was destroying her. The attitude of someone who thinks they're above accountability," Whoopi replied, her voice cutting through the studio like a knife. "You want to be the victim in every scenario, Meghan. But sometimes, just sometimes, you need to look in the mirror and ask yourself what role you played in all of this." Meghan's face flushed red. "You have absolutely no idea what you're talking about. You weren't there. You didn't live through what I lived through." "You're right. I wasn't there," Whoopi acknowledged. "But I've been watching from the outside. And what I see is someone who had every opportunity in the world and threw it all away because things got difficult." "Threw it away." Meghan's voice cracked with disbelief. "I was suicidal, Whoopi. I was having thoughts of ending my life. But sure, let's call that throwing opportunities away." The studio fell into complete silence. Even Whoopi seemed momentarily taken aback by the raw pain in Meghan's voice. But she quickly regained her composure. "Mental health struggles are real and serious," Whoopi said, her tone measured but firm. "But using your mental health as a shield against any criticism isn't fair either." "A shield." Meghan stepped closer to Whoopi's side of the table, her voice dropping to a dangerous whisper. "You think sharing the darkest moments of my life is using them as a shield?" "I think you've weaponized your pain," Whoopi said without flinching. "And that's not the same thing as healing from it." The other hosts looked absolutely mortified. Joy kept opening her mouth as if to speak, but no words came out. Sarah had her head in her hands. Sunny looked like she was witnessing a car crash in slow motion. "Weaponized my pain," Meghan repeated, her voice barely audible but filled with fury. "Is that what you call speaking truth to power? Is that what you call standing up for yourself?" "I call it convenient," Whoopi replied coldly. "It's convenient to paint yourself as the victim when people start asking uncomfortable questions about your choices." "My choices." Meghan was practically vibrating with anger now. "Let me tell you about my choices, Whoopi. I chose to marry someone I loved, despite knowing it would be difficult. I chose to try to serve that institution with dignity, despite being treated like an outsider from day one. I chose to stay silent for months, while the press destroyed my reputation. And when I finally chose to speak up, to tell my side of the story, you're calling that weaponizing my pain." "I'm calling it selective storytelling," Whoopi shot back. "Because there are always two sides to every story, And yours is the only one we've been hearing. Because it's my story to tell, Meghan exploded. It's my life, my experience, my trauma. I don't owe anyone a balanced perspective on my own suffering. But you do owe people honesty, Whoopi countered. And I'm not convinced we're getting the whole truth. That was the final straw. Meghan's face went completely white, then red, then white again. You're calling me a liar. I'm saying I have questions, Whoopi replied evenly. Questions. Meghan laughed bitterly, the sound echoing through the silent studio. You have questions about whether racism exists. You have questions about whether I was treated unfairly. You have questions about whether I was pushed to the breaking point. I have questions about your version of events. Yes. Meghan stared at Whoopi for a long moment, her chest rising and falling rapidly. Then she did something no one expected. She started removing her microphone. What are you doing? Joy finally found her voice. I'm done, Meghan said simply, unclipping the small device from her dress. I'm absolutely done. Whoopi crossed her arms, running away again. Meghan froze, her hands still holding the microphone. She turned back to face Whoopi, and when she spoke, her voice was ice cold. You know what, Whoopi? You're right about one thing. I am done trying to explain myself to people who have already made up their minds about who I am. I'm done trying to justify my choices to people who weren't there, who didn't live it, who don't know what it's like to have your entire existence questioned and criticized every single day. She placed the microphone on the table with deliberate precision. I came here thinking I could have an honest conversation about my experiences. Instead, I'm being interrogated like I'm on trial for the crime of protecting my family. Meghan, please. Sarah tried one last time to mediate. But Meghan held up her hand. No, Sarah. This is exactly what I'm talking about. This, right here. The assumption that I owe everyone an explanation for every decision I've made. The idea that my pain needs to be validated by others before it's considered real. She looked directly at Whoopi. You want to question my truth? Go ahead. You want to minimize my experiences? Feel free. But I don't have to stand here and listen to it. Whoopi's expression remained unmoved. So, you're leaving. Just like you left the royal family. Just like you left your acting career when things got complicated. Meghan paused at the edge of the set, her back to the panel. Without turning around, she said, No, Whoopi. I'm choosing myself again, and I'm not apologizing for it anymore. And with that, she walked off the set, leaving behind a stunned audience and a panel of hosts who looked like they had just witnessed television history in the making. Whoopi finally broke the silence. Well, ladies and gentlemen, I guess that's a wrap. The cameras kept rolling as the credits began to play, capturing the shocked faces of the remaining hosts and an audience that couldn't quite believe what they had just witnessed. So there you have it, folks. One of the most explosive confrontations in daytime television history. What did you think of how both women handled this situation? Was Whoopi right to push back, or did she go too far? Did Meghan have every right to walk away, or should she have stayed to finish the conversation? Drop your thoughts in the comments below, and make sure to subscribe for more incredible stories like this one.